The wheelchair rolled into the press room, and 300 journalists fell silent. What this disabled Vietnam veteran was about to say to Muhammad Ali would shock everyone. But Ali's response 60 seconds later would transform the most hostile moment of his career into the most beautiful display of grace anyone had ever witnessed. If this story of unexpected grace moves you, subscribe for more untold moments that show what true character looks like. Drop a comment below about a time when someone's response to anger taught you something profound. Your story matters too. The wheels of the wheelchair squeaked against the polished floor of the Marriott Hotel press room as Sergeant Michael O'Connor pushed himself toward the front of the crowd. Every journalist in the room turned to watch this unexpected interruption to Muhammad Ali's post-fight press conference following his historic victory over Joe Frazier in Manila. It was October 2nd, 1975, and the atmosphere in the room had been celebratory just moments before. But now an uncomfortable tension filled the air as this battle-scarred veteran positioned himself directly in front of the heavyweight champion of the world. Michael O'Connor was 28 years old, though his weathered face and haunted eyes made him look decades older. Both of his legs had been amputated below the knee after stepping on a landmine near Saigon 18 months earlier during what was supposed to be a routine patrol. The explosion had killed two of his closest friends instantly and left him buried under debris for 6 hours before rescue teams could reach him. He wore his army dress uniform, the chest decorated with medals including a Purple Heart, Bronze Star, and Combat Infantryman badge. Honors that felt meaningless to him now. His hands, calloused from months of physical therapy and learning to navigate life in a wheelchair, gripped the armrest so tightly his knuckles had turned white. The simple act of attending this press conference had required him to arrange special transportation, navigate his wheelchair through crowds, and endure stares and whispered comments about his condition. He had driven 12 hours from his small apartment in Akron, Ohio, where he lived alone with memories that haunted his sleep and a rage that had been building for years every time he saw Muhammad Ali's face on television or heard his name mentioned in the news. The veteran had saved every newspaper article about Ali's refusal to serve, each story feeling like another insult to his sacrifice and the sacrifice of every man who had served in his place. Ali sat at the head table, still glowing from his victory over Frazier in what many considered the greatest boxing match ever fought. The thriller in Manila had pushed both fighters to their absolute limits, with Ali collapsing in his corner after 14 brutal rounds before Frazier's trainer mercifully stopped the fight. Ali's face bore the evidence of the war he had endured: swollen cheeks, nearly closed eyes from the punishment he'd absorbed, and small cuts that told the story of 14 rounds of violence. Yet despite his physical condition, he was answering questions with his characteristic wit and confidence, discussing strategy and future opponents with the assembled media. The champion seemed relaxed and in control, surrounded by his team of advisors and handlers who carefully managed his public image. He had no idea that his comfortable post-fight routine was about to be shattered by a confrontation that would test not his boxing skills, but his character and compassion in ways the ring never could. When O'Connor's wheelchair came to a stop just 10 feet away from the champion, the contrast was stark and uncomfortable. The victorious athlete at the peak of his powers facing a broken soldier who had paid the ultimate price for his service. "Mr. Ali," O'Connor called out, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. The veteran's words carried the weight of profound pain and bitter resentment. "I have something to say to you, and I want everyone in this room to hear it." Ali looked up from the microphone, his battered features showing concern as he noticed the man's uniform in the wheelchair. The room fell completely silent, with only the soft clicking of camera shutters breaking the tense quiet that had settled over the crowd of journalists and photographers. O'Connor's voice trembled with emotion as he began to speak, but his words came out clear and strong. "My name is Sergeant Michael O'Connor, United States Army. I served 2 tours in Vietnam before I lost my legs to a Viet Cong landmine in March of 1974. I volunteered for both tours because I believed it was my duty to serve my country, even though I was terrified and didn't want to go. I went because that's what you do when your country calls, and that's what real men do when their nation needs them." His eyes never left Ali's face as he continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "But you, Mr. Ali, you refused to go. You claimed your religion wouldn't let you fight, that your conscience was more important than your duty. While I was crawling through rice paddies and watching my friends die in that jungle, you were here living in luxury, making millions of dollars, being celebrated as a hero. The veteran paused, taking a deep breath before delivering the accusation that he had rehearsed in his mind countless times during his long drive to the press conference. You're not a hero, Mr. Ali. You're a coward. You should have been in that jungle instead of me. You should have been the one stepping on that landmine. If you had done your duty like a real man, maybe I'd still have my legs. Maybe some of my friends would still be alive. Instead, you hid behind your religion and let better men than you fight and die in your place. O'Connor's voice cracked with emotion as he finished his devastating attack, but he maintained eye contact with Ali, waiting for a response from the man he held responsible for so much of his suffering. The silence that followed O'Connor's words was absolute. 300 journalists who made their living with words found themselves completely speechless in the face of such raw emotion and moral accusation. Ali's handlers immediately moved to end the confrontation, but the champion raised his hand, signaling them to stop. He stood up slowly from his chair, his own body still aching from the brutal fight he had endured just days earlier, and walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of the wheelchair-bound veteran. What Ali did next would shock everyone in that room and change both men's lives forever. Instead of defending himself or responding with anger to such a personal and public attack, Ali knelt down on one knee so that he was at eye level with O'Connor. The gesture immediately changed the dynamic in the room from confrontation to conversation, from hostility to humanity. Ali's voice, when he finally spoke, was gentle and filled with genuine respect for the man who had just called him a coward in front of the world's media. "Sergeant O'Connor," Ali said softly, "first I want to thank you for your service to our country. What you did in Vietnam, the courage you showed, the sacrifices you made, that deserves respect and honor, not just from me, but from every American." Ali paused, choosing his words carefully as he looked into O'Connor's eyes, seeing not just anger but profound pain and loss. "You called me a coward, and I understand why you feel that way. From where you're sitting, from what you've been through, my choice to refuse induction looks like I was running away from my duty while you ran toward yours. I can see how that would make you angry, how it would seem unfair and wrong." The champion's voice remained calm and compassionate, even as he addressed the most serious accusation anyone could level against him. "But Sergeant, can I ask you something? When you volunteered for Vietnam, what were you fighting for? What did you believe you were defending?" O'Connor, caught off guard by Ali's respectful tone and thoughtful question, answered honestly, "I was fighting for freedom, for democracy, for the right of people to live without oppression. I was fighting to protect the American way of life and the values our country stands for." His voice carried conviction, despite his confusion at the direction this conversation was taking. Ali nodded thoughtfully, his expression showing genuine understanding and respect for the veteran's beliefs and motivations. "That's exactly why I couldn't go," Ali said, his words surprising everyone in the room. "Not because I was afraid of fighting or dying, but because I was fighting for those same things right here at home. Sergeant, when I was growing up in Louisville, I couldn't eat at the same lunch counters as white children. I couldn't stay in the same hotels, couldn't swim in the same pools, couldn't even use the same water fountains. The America I knew wasn't the America of freedom and equality that you were fighting to defend overseas." Ali's voice grew stronger as he continued, but never lost its respectful tone. "I looked at that war and I asked myself, how can I go fight for freedom in Vietnam when my own people don't have freedom here in America? How can I kill poor people in a foreign country when the real enemy of freedom was right here in my own backyard?" The veteran's expression began to change as Ali continued speaking, the anger in his eyes slowly giving way to something else: confusion, consideration, perhaps even understanding. Ali saw this shift and pressed on, his words coming from a place of deep conviction and hard-won wisdom. "You and we were both fighting the same war, Sergeant. The war for human dignity, for equality, for the right of all people to be treated with respect. You fought your battle in the jungles of Vietnam, believing that's where freedom needed to be defended. I fought my battle in the courts and in the streets of America, believing that's where freedom needed to be won. Ali stood up and began pacing slowly in front of O'Connor's wheelchair, his hands gesturing as he spoke with the passion that had made him not just a great boxer, but a powerful speaker and advocate. When I refused to go to Vietnam, I knew I would lose everything. My title, my prime earning years, my freedom, maybe even my life. I was stripped of my championship, banned from boxing for 3.5 years, faced 5 years in federal prison. Every day I woke up wondering if today would be the day they came to take me away. Is that the behavior of a coward, Sergeant? To risk everything you've worked for, everything you've achieved, because you believe in something bigger than yourself? O'Connor's hands had relaxed their grip on his wheelchair armrests as he listened to Ali's explanation. For the first time since his injury, he was hearing the draft resistance put in terms that made sense to him as a soldier, as someone who understood duty and sacrifice. Ali noticed this change and knelt down again, bringing himself back to the veteran's eye level for what would become the most powerful moment of their encounter. "Sergeant, I want you to know something," Ali said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the silent room. "Every day since I made that decision, I've thought about men like you. I've thought about the soldiers who went in my place, who faced dangers I never had to face. I've wondered if I made the right choice, if there was another way to fight for what I believed in. And I want you to know that your sacrifice, your pain, your loss, it's not meaningless. It's not forgotten. The fact that you went and served and suffered while I stayed and fought here, that doesn't make you lesser or greater than me. It makes you a different kind of hero." The veteran's eyes had filled with tears as Ali continued speaking, his voice thick with emotion as he addressed the guilt and anger that had consumed O'Connor for months. "You think I should have been the one to step on that landmine, and maybe you're right. Maybe if I had gone, some things would have been different. But Sergeant, can I tell you what I think? I think you and I were both called to serve our country in different ways. You served with your body, with your blood, with your legs. I served with my voice, with my career, with my freedom. We both sacrificed for what we believed in. We both paid a price for our convictions." Ali reached out and placed his hand gently on O'Connor's shoulder, a gesture that somehow bridged the enormous gap between their experiences and perspectives. "The real enemy isn't you or me, Sergeant. The real enemy is the system that sent young men like you to die in foreign jungles while denying basic rights to citizens here at home. The real enemy is the poverty and ignorance and hatred that makes war seem like the only solution to human problems. You and I were on the same side of that fight, even if we chose different battlefields." For several moments, the two men simply looked at each other in silence, the tension that had filled the room slowly dissipating as understanding replaced accusation. O'Connor wiped tears from his eyes with the back of his hand, his voice breaking as he finally spoke. "I never thought about it that way," he admitted. "I was so angry, so bitter about what happened to me, about what I lost. I needed someone to blame, and you were an easy target because you were famous, and you made a choice I couldn't understand." The veteran paused, struggling to find the right words. "I still don't agree with everything you did, but I can see now that it took courage too. A different kind of courage than what I showed, but courage all the same." Ali smiled, but it was a sad smile filled with understanding of the pain both men had endured. "Sergeant, disagreeing with my choices doesn't make you wrong any more than making those choices made me right. We're both just men trying to do what we think is best with the circumstances we were given. The important thing is that we both tried to serve something bigger than ourselves." The champion paused, then made a request that surprised everyone in the room. "Can I ask you for a favor? Will you tell me about the friends you lost over there? I'd like to know their names, their stories. I think it's important that I understand the full cost of the choices I made." What followed was a conversation that lasted over an hour, with O'Connor sharing stories of fallen comrades while Ali listened with rapt attention and genuine sorrow. The press conference had long since ceased to be about boxing or celebrity. It had become something much more important, a dialogue between two men who had chosen different paths but discovered they shared the same fundamental values of courage, service, and sacrifice. When the conversation finally ended, O'Connor extended his hand to Ali, and the two men shook hands with mutual respect and understanding. The veteran's final words before leaving the press conference would be quoted in newspapers across the country. I came here today to confront a coward. Instead, I met a different kind of soldier. Muhammad Ali and I fought different wars, but we both fought for America. I can respect that, even if I don't fully understand it. The photograph of Ali kneeling beside O'Connor's wheelchair, their hands clasped in respect and reconciliation, became one of the most powerful images of the era. It appeared on the front pages of newspapers across the country and was later displayed in the Smithsonian as an example of how understanding can triumph over hostility when people are willing to listen to each other's perspectives. The image captured something deeper than a simple handshake between two men. It showed the possibility of healing between those who had chosen different paths during one of America's most divisive periods. The impact of that encounter extended far beyond the press conference room and continued to resonate for decades. O'Connor became an advocate for veterans' rights and eventually worked with Ali on several charitable projects supporting wounded soldiers. Their unlikely friendship, which began with accusation and anger, evolved into a partnership dedicated to helping others understand that true patriotism can take many forms, and that real courage is often found in the willingness to see beyond our own pain, to understand someone else's perspective. They appeared together at numerous speaking engagements, sharing their story as an example of how Americans could disagree on fundamental issues while still maintaining respect for each other's convictions. O'Connor often spoke about how that day taught him that there are many ways to serve one's country, and that sometimes the most difficult service involves standing alone against popular opinion for what you believe is right. Years later, when Ali was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, O'Connor was among the first to visit him, bringing with him a letter he had written but never sent, an apology for his initial attack, and a thank you for teaching him that heroes come in many forms, that courage has many faces, and that sometimes the greatest victory is not winning a fight, but preventing one through the power of understanding and respect. The letter, which O'Connor read aloud to Ali despite the champion's difficulty responding due to his condition, spoke of how their encounter had changed his entire worldview and helped him find purpose in his own suffering. O'Connor had kept that letter for over a decade, revising it countless times as his understanding of that day's significance deepened. In the letter, he wrote about how Ali's response had saved him from a lifetime of bitterness, how it had shown him that even the deepest wounds could heal when met with genuine compassion, and how their friendship had taught him that true strength lies not in the ability to inflict pain, but in the wisdom to transform it into understanding. The veteran who rolled into that press conference to confront Muhammad Ali as a coward left as a man who understood that the champion's greatest victory was not in any boxing ring, but in his ability to transform hostility into understanding, accusation into dialogue, and an enemy into a friend through the simple but profound act of listening with respect and responding with grace. That day proved that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with fists, but with words, patience, and the courage to see humanity in those who challenge us most fiercely.